Good afternoon and welcome to the webinar on M&E in Government, Partnerships in a Multi-Stakeholder Environment. This is part of the Local Evaluation Week. I'm Aayog Mishra, Director in Development Monitoring and Evaluation Office, DMEO, which is the apex monitoring and evaluation institution of Government of India. Let me introduce my distinguished panel. I have with me Dr. Sekhar Bonu, Director General of DMEO. Dr. Bonu has spent over 12 years in Indian Administrative Service and worked for close to 15 years in ADB. Professor Ashwini Chhatre, Executive Director, Bharati Institute of Public Policy, which is part of Indian School of Business, ISP, which is one of the most premier business schools in India. Maaike Bijker, who is a monitoring and evaluation specialist from UNICEF, and Shagun Sabarwal, who is the director of the CLEAR South Asia Center and also the director of policy, training, and communication at JPAL South Asia. So a very warm welcome to all of you. Let me just take a few minutes to talk about the housekeeping issues. It's an hour-long session. We'll have 3 to 4 minutes of introductory remarks by each of the panelists, starting with Dr. Bonu, then Maaike, Professor Ashwini, and Shagun. Thereafter, we will have a moderator discussing with panelists for about 20 minutes. After that, we will open the floor for questions by participants. Audience can type their questions in the Q&A, and I'll try to get as many possible answers from the panelists. Let me begin by stating the objectives of this session. As all of you know, that M&E is coming to occupy the center stage in the development narrative world over, and partnerships become key to building strong M&E organizations. Briefly, there are 3 objectives of this session. What we plan to do is broadly how and why partnerships can be a strategic option for government M&E organizations. Second, what we are going to talk about is we would like to understand the determinants of a win-win partnership. And finally, how do we go about implementing successful partnerships? This would deal with structure, mechanisms, and process of partnership. So without taking much time, I would request Dr. Bonu to say opening remarks, followed by Maaike, Professor Ashwini, and Shagun. Dr. Bonu, over to you.
Dr. Bonu, I think you're on mute.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Good evening, everyone. Thanks, Aayog. Around 1 year, 2 months back, I joined as Director General of this organization, which is hosting this event in collaboration with JPAL and other colleagues. This is the Development Monitoring Evaluation Office, which is the apex monitoring and evaluation office of this country. It's an attached office of NITI Aayog, which is the apex think tank for the government of India. So among many objectives of this organization, one of the important objective is to build the overall monitoring and evaluation ecosystem across the whole country, in addition to a number of evaluation studies that we do. And when we initially explored the challenges which are there to build the strong monitoring and evaluation ecosystem in this country, and the capabilities within the organization, we quickly realized that the only way we could fulfill this objective is through strategic partnerships. And we went ahead and started looking at the partnerships. It's still an evolving process, and I hope we will get some interesting ideas today on which we can build further. But broadly, we know that there are a lot of cutting-edge organizations, the think tanks outside with whom we can collaborate. Within India too, there are a number of cutting-edge organizations. We are glad to have Ashwini today with us, and also there are a number of institutions at state level and also spread across sectoral experiences with whom we need to partner, in addition to non-profit companies, even cutting-edge private sector companies. Given the complexity of data information technology, since all of them seems to be converging when we talk about monitoring and evaluation. So the power of partnership we have quickly realized, and we have started rolling it out. And I'm very glad that today we have 3 other panelists who are part of that partnership journey. And I hope through their experiences and also our experiences, we can share this journey, which is still an evolving process. We, as a team in DMEO, are still working on how we can create those synergic partnerships where everyone comes out winner, and we create synergies that strengthen the monitoring and evaluation ecosystem to make sure that public expenditures are utilized in the most effective manner. I conclude my opening remarks here. Thank you.
Maaike?
Great. I have the privilege of going first. I'll try to keep it to 3 or 4 minutes as instructed. It's very difficult because there's a lot of great things that we would like to say. Also in our collaboration with DMEO over the past, year, we've been in contact with the last couple of months in more detail. So I hope that most of the participants know, but UNICEF in India, UNICEF globally works to promote the rights of children, adolescents, and women. And we work across a couple of different sectors like health, education, nutrition, hygiene, social protection, social development. And actually a core aspect of what we do is monitoring, research, and evaluation. Historically, we've been more of a humanitarian program implementing organization, but especially in places like India, where our role is really advocacy and helping governments, line ministries, and state governments actually devise policies and programs, evidence becomes crucial. And so over the past many years, we've actually become a partner for a lot of line ministries and state governments in terms of strengthening their monitoring systems and actually running some evaluations, monitoring and evaluations for government counterparts. And based on there's a real need and a real demand for timely and high quality evidence, especially coming from M&E, so monitoring, evaluation, but also research. And our focus is obviously to improve the outcomes, sustainable outcomes, and the impacts of the government work on children, adolescents, and their families. And so we've really become sort of like a go-to entity for a lot of the governments. And often they turn to us to try and source qualified researchers and evaluations to ensure kind of oversight and quality assurance mechanisms in evaluations and activities, and very crucially, translating findings into policy recommendations. One of the things that I know a lot of our partners value in us is that we're able to take findings from our evaluations and research that we commission through research partners or evaluating teams, and then bring it to the table and make it relevant and make it informative. While we do a lot of monitoring and evaluation on behalf of government, ultimately the goal for us is actually what we call national evaluation capacity development. So for us, we would rather not be the ones doing that. We would rather strengthen a unit or an institution like the DMEO that could actually become the leading kind of apex institution, like Dr. Bonu sir and Aayog also said. So under that guise, actually, or under that mandate that we have specifically, we've started partnering with the DMEO, and we started conversations over a year ago. And what we've actually started working on, or tried to leverage, of what we've understood really of the need of partnerships, which is really what it comes down to in our national evaluation capacity development and broader work that we do, is really the need for strong institutional structure, adequate and well-trained resources or personnel, and the right tools to do this. And so these are some of the areas in which we've been having conversations with the DMEO. And fortunately, in India, we have an M&E ecosystem that is incredibly advanced and incredibly talented. Entities like JPAL, ISB, and others offer a lot of opportunities, skills, knowledge, and so forth for the DMEO to leverage. So partnerships absolutely makes the right sense. I think that's what Dr. Bonu was saying. From our perspective, what we really offer, we think, is being a knowledge and convening partner. So we have an intimate understanding of child's rights and issues. So we have sectoral expertise. We have a global network of M&E experts actually that we can tap into. And we, like I said, have success in actually translating findings into decision making. And we also have quite a lot of experience building M&E infrastructures across different countries. So that is what we're actually bringing to the table. And under that guise, we've actually set up, very helpfully, DMEO has constructed a framework for partnerships, and we're helping on some of the strategic technical assistance, support in the monitoring and evaluation policy, implementation frameworks, toolkits and guidelines. Internally, UNICEF has quite a structured structure for research and evaluation and monitoring, and so we've shared a lot of our own structures, documents, and guidelines. Capacity building, doing joint workshops, actually for our own staff as well as for other staff members, because we internally also benefit from that, and knowledge exchange. And actually, one of the key activities I wanted to highlight under this partnership that we've done is we've actually been able to have engage a qualified consultant, Dr. Gonzalo, who actually set up Coneval in Mexico to come and visit and do a kind of scoping mission, but it's a longer term engagement to provide advice on how to best go about establishing a really world-class M&E unit in the government. And I think that's already been incredibly fruitful for everyone at the table, and including UNICEF. We've learned a lot from this experience ourselves. And so one of the questions I know that we were given in preparation, and I'll end it there because I'm sure I'm way over time. What is in it for us? Unlike, I guess, a lot of maybe other partners, the JPALs and more academic institutions, we're not necessarily the technical experts. But like I said, national evaluation capacity development is a core mandate for us. And really for us, it's to make sure that whatever any government does in any country in the world, that it's actually evidence-based, it is monitored and evaluated, and therefore can make the biggest difference to the lives of children and their families, and that's the case here as well. So I'm going to end it there, and I'm sure lots of questions. I hope that was a brief overview. Thanks.
Yes. Thanks, Maaike. Professor Ashwini.
You need to unmute Ashwini.
Thank you very much. I would like to take a slightly different tack. I am very glad that all of you think ISB is a premier institution, but when it comes to M&E, it is somewhat unfortunate because I don't think we are as good as we would like to be and we can be. And part of the reason, it's not for lack of trying or sources and so on, but part of the reason is that the ecosystem is so undeveloped. So it's very hard for one institution to be exceedingly good when there are no other institutions to partner with and to talk to and so on. So all our partners are outside of India, and that is unfortunate. The primary reason for why this is so, in my opinion, and why therefore the efforts of DMEO are so important, and especially today when we are committing 10% of our GDP to the recovery, which we need to know is spent well and how to spend it well. The primary reasons are threefold, which we are trying to do our best to overcome. The first is neglect of a primary resource that we have unfortunately never considered or used, and these are students. So think about the science college students in the 6,000 talukas and mandals which have botany classes and botany and zoology specializations and so on, who really play no role at all in what is known as surveillance, right? Basic monitoring. Are NREGA assets being created? Are flu cases being documented? Simple. So disease surveillance has been the primary driver of medical research and epidemiology. We can think of students as the front line of our surveillance, our monitoring, but we hardly ever use them. We don't think of them. And after they have already graduated, we sort of fret over whether they will get jobs or whether they are trained well or not. But they play almost no role. And this is a tremendous resource that we miss. So we at ISB this year have started an initiative called Jumpstart India at ISB, where we are collaborating with state governments and government agencies in the central government to help them address challenges where we have our strengths through student teams. So students will work on these projects that are going to solve problems that are faced by, for example, the Punjab Mandi Board and the Haryana Mandi Board face problems in terms of how to deal with Kharif procurement after having done it successfully in Rabi and so on. And it's a very massive exercise, and it has to be done. It has to be done well. The second major obstacle is data. We tend to think of data as equivalent to mushrooms. We go out and collect them in the forest, we bring them back, we chop them up and make soup out of it. Perhaps once upon a time, data was like that. You went out and you collected data like mushrooms, although I don't believe so. We make the data that we then analyze. But today, the old distinction between primary data and secondary data has broken down. Now what we are thinking about is, what are we sensing? Transaction data. So every time an Indian citizen puts down her thumb on a POS machine at the fertilizer sales counter or the PDS counter, it is recorded. And this transaction data provides fantastic monitoring opportunities. We have not yet incorporated the wealth of this data. Of course, there are trade-offs with privacy, and we need to deal with them and take it very seriously and deal with it carefully. But there is a wealth of data that is neither primary nor secondary. It's new age. It's the 21st century. The third major resource that we have leads to the problem with the second one, which is that a lot of this data is messy. Sometimes the server is down, sometimes the POS machine doesn't work, and so on and so forth. But we have these new data science tools, machine learning, that can work with messy data, that can combine different kinds of data, that potentially feeds into the monitoring apparatus, which is easy to incorporate on mobile phones and on POS machines and all of these electronic devices that are capturing data at the transaction level. We don't need to know who is doing it. We need maybe just to know the frequency and the volume and whether it is higher or lower than yesterday or the neighboring village and so on. But we can get it at a really high resolution. And through these kinds of partnership involving students, involving new kinds of data, and involving new data science technologies, we can marry the monitoring and evaluation part, which is exactly what epidemiology did. It took the disease surveillance and built models out of it, which can be evaluated based where interventions can be evaluated on whether they are successful or not, such as lockdowns, for example. We can do that if we put the right partnerships in place. If we can build these relationships to bring in students, because they are a fantastic resource, use the new data and use the new data science tools. So I'll stop there, because I believe these are important topics that are not yet being discussed.
That's right. Yes.
I will, of course, be very happy to take questions later.
Right. Thanks, Professor. Coming to Shagun.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I just wanted to thank DMEO for organizing this particular session as a part of the G Local Week, and really excited to be here. So I think it's been great to hear from our co-panelists, and I completely agree with both Maaike and Professor Chhatre, where they are trying to emphasize the importance, whether it's like looking at innovative ways or seeing how we can leverage certain resources that may currently be underutilized, or whether how Maaike is talking about the national capacity development approach. I think the perspective that I want to take is, again, a little bit different, where I want to come in from the perspective of if we really think about the needs of the governments and thinking about M&E capacity as being a systems level change. That doesn't need to just be about using X data for coming up with some findings, although that's absolutely great, and that's how I think a lot of the work has been happening in India. But for us to move away from this piecemeal, fragmented approach, I think what we really need is to think about that for governments to really adopt a data-driven, evidence-backed approach for their decision-making can only work if it is incentive compatible for the policymakers, if it is really about meeting their needs and kind of meeting them in the way they work, right? And I feel that is why the theme for today's topic is particularly rich and almost profound, because many times all of us are trying to come in with our perspectives and our comparative advantages, which is great. But for things to really move at a systems level, we need a shared vision where everyone is kind of marrying to things that may even go over and above their areas of comparative advantage, right? And I think even to the points that has been made, I think administrative data or transactional data, I think it's extremely, it's so rich, and we have still not kind of used even, I see, a fraction of its potential. But here again, thinking about what are some of the data security protocols, how does the government really think about sharing this data? What about quality? So all of these things which again require a more systems level perspective to bring together different stakeholders and create a kind of an ecosystem that really enables this to happen. And I think at the bottom of all of this is a behavior change that is also required, which is about the data used. So you can really focus a lot on ensuring that the architecture exists, high quality data exists. But if you are not incentivizing the decision makers, the policy makers to use this data to make decisions, or even showing them the power of data, right? Like what can some simple descriptive trends do for you when you are trying to take decisions around where to allocate certain resources, right? Within a specific scheme can be very powerful. And I think, so I do think that those are some things which we should also think about. And I know that, I mean, for JPAL, or if I wear my Clear South Asia hat, we have been working very closely with certain state governments in India. And I think that itself gives us a lot of lessons on things that seem to be working and that, may not be the right approach. But two things I can say for me that really stand out. So if you're really serious about partnering with government entities on trying to really relook and reshape what M&E can do, or what M&E can bring to the table, I think two things are really necessary. One is a long-term approach or a long-term partnership. And I think this is something where, especially in this particular crisis situation, we are all realizing that, it's really important to use data. It's very important to have these quick wins. But if you do not have a foundation or a platform through which there are mechanisms and feedback loops that exist for a decision maker at the end of the day, for a secretary at the end of the day to say, okay, I'm seeing this data on my dashboard and this is how I'm going to look at it, it's not really going to be possible. So I think the long-term perspective is really important, and which is why, even though I think consulting organizations add a lot of value, there are limitations to coming at this from a very project-based lens, right? The second perspective I think which is really important is the embeddedness. And this again is sort of a kind of a paradox, because we're talking about getting external partners. But like I'm saying, these partnerships will only be successful if they really marry the manner in which governments and policymakers work, which means you have to work from within and not just without, right? So I think it's very easy to say, this is how JPAL collects data, this is what we do to ensure that our quality is extremely high, this is how we use administrative data. But for the governments to get to that level, it's really important that we have staff that are based with the government, that are also doing this hands-on work with them as they roll out things. So I would just like to stop here with my opening remarks, and I'm looking forward to the panel discussion today.
Great. So absolutely is a wonderful perspectives coming from all the four panelists. Dr. Bonu, just starting with you, DMEO has been trying to collaborate with international organizations, academic and research institutions, and even private sector, especially when it's data for public policy is concerned. So I just wanted to understand what has been the experience and what have been some of the challenges that you faced.
Yeah, as I mentioned, we are still at an early stage of partnership building. Partnership has to be win-win for all the stakeholders. It just can't be one-sided. Clearly, when we have from the government, it is challenging to have partnerships or arrangements where funds are involved. As soon as money is involved, it has to go through a particular procurement process, which turns it into a contractee type of relationship. It doesn't become any more partnership based, and it is also task based. You can't have very long-term partnerships. So clearly, I think that is going to be a big challenge. So far, we have had statement of intent signed with JPAL. Largely, there's no funds involved, and in fact, it is one way. I think JPAL is going to support us in different manners. So when we want to achieve long-term partnerships where significant funds, government has a large amount of funds. It provides support to training institutions, and there are a lot of government-aided colleges and so forth. But how do we channel some of those government funds into a process where, based on some principles, long-term partnerships are established, where while doing things, we also build capabilities in the system, get pre-surveys, students, researchers get involved, build their capabilities, get more talent to come into monitoring and evaluation system, and slowly build that larger ecosystem. But it has to be based on trust. It has to be based on predictable long-term funding. So that's the challenge, and I think that's the challenge that we are currently grappling. While we continue to grapple with this challenge, we are looking at opportunities where we can continue to move forward. So with UNICEF, with JPAL, where that particular issue is not there, and some of the institutions have their some other sources of funding, where currently we can work on knowledge sharing. But our goal ultimately is to see if we can come up with some schemes where we have long-term arrangements with knowledge partners to get the monitoring and evaluation work done while building the monitoring and evaluation ecosystem. I'll stop here.
Okay, Maaike, just sort of coming to you, UNICEF has been undertaking a number of partnerships with, like you talked about, with state governments, with various ministries. So what are the different kind of mechanisms and structures for, these partnerships, for implementing them, that you have been undertaking?
I'm assuming this is for specifically M&E activities.
That's right. That's right. Yes.
So most of the time, so generally the way that we work at state level as well as at central level is that we have work plans that are agreed between our nodal ministries. And so under that, we actually feed in our monitoring and evaluation and capacity development activities. So that's kind of the, I guess, the logistical or procedural way in which we do it. In practice, we have been able, in some cases, to leverage co-funding. So in some cases, we've had some of our partners at state level actually co-funding some of our evaluations, some of the monitoring that we're doing. But actually, most of the time when it comes down to funding, and like Dr. Bonu was saying, UNICEF does a lot of the funding support. And that's not necessarily because there is no funding on the government side. It's actually like I think Dr. Bonu was saying as well, it's very difficult for a lot of government ministries and partners that we work with to go through the bureaucracy and the procurement. So that's actually one of the advantages that we have in the way that we work together. One of the key things that we're looking forward to is do something that we would officially say is a joint evaluation. Up till now, we have not been able to do one of those yet, but that would really be in a collaborative partnership, and is actually one of the items that we have on our list to hopefully do in collaboration with the DMEO. So that is some of the ways in which we engage. But I think the most important part is through our ongoing relationship. And I think this is the point that Shagun was also saying, where we have been quite successful, especially at state level, is we've been able to establish longer term work plan partnerships, which cover the whole advisory services that we do. So we do more than, we produce briefs and recommendations and so forth. And under that, we establish that monitoring and evaluation is necessary. Monitoring, research, and evaluation, by the way, research is an important evidence function as well. And so under that, we have a mutual understanding of what is going to come out of this. And we work in these plans for a year. And they're collaboratively decided with the government. So that's kind of the way that we work. But we've been doing this for a long period of time. So we've been rolling in this way for a longer period of time at state level. Yeah, hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, that's right. Professor Ashwini, coming to you, academicians have a different way of working. They do emphasize rigor. They are not entirely in sync with the strict timelines, but policymakers work on short timelines. How do you strike that balance when you enter into these partnerships, and what are the incentives on part of an academic institution for such partnerships?
So I think this is a perceived friction.
Okay.
Certainly inflamed by many academics who pretend that this is true. I think there are at least two important facts. One is that the large majority of academics are not interested in monitoring and evaluation. We have to face that reality, and that's fine. It's their choice. Nobody should be forcing them to do anything. And we should be focusing on the people who are actually interested in monitoring and evaluation, because it takes different kinds of training, different levels of patience. It requires people to work with a lot of other strange and weird non-academic people. So it's not for all academics. So we should not assume that academics as a tribe are enthusiastic about monitoring and evaluation. They are not. They want to do their own thing, and where funding is available, they are willing to pretend that they are doing monitoring and evaluation, but that is just plain wrong. Okay. The second fact is that of the people who are interested, willing, and able to engage in monitoring and evaluation exercises, I see very little resistance to the idea of doing things quickly or more conveniently. And I see in all my interactions with the best people in the world, a lack of resistance to compromises. These are, and there is a selection bias there. These are the people who are selecting themselves to do monitoring and evaluation because they know how messy the world is and it needs better evaluation outcomes. So I believe the impression is because of the good press that the best people get. Because I mean, I know that even Abhijit Banerjee and Esther Duflo, in private conversations certainly, and in public as well, work with governments all the time on messy data sets, and perhaps not for quick results, but certainly sort of a continuous stream of results.
Right. Okay.
So that's just not true, I think.
Okay, understand. Shagun, coming to you, since Abhijit was mentioned, I was just wondering that there's this long impression that is there that JPAL is only focused on impact evaluation, and given that kind of perceived image, how do you align and deliver on demands of these partnerships? That that sort of state governments, you have been having a sort of a partnership with various state governments in India and across the world, indeed.
Yeah, great. So I think what I would like to say is, first of all, it is not a long impression. JPAL does focus on impact evaluations using randomized evaluations. That's very much the case. But I think it's really that we bring a 360 approach to the work that we do. So like Maaike said, I think all our state partnerships are also founded on the principles of doing everything together, which means you have original research, which is most likely randomized evaluations. But here again, these are usually preceded by formative research, needs assessments, which are typically use mixed methods as an approach. And then you have the impact evaluation. And again, I want to say a lot of these randomized evaluations, especially increasingly, are of government programs themselves, right? And it is possible to randomize it. Of course, you can't have it for a universal rollout, but there are state governments who are willing to pilot some of these schemes, which they should actually do an RCT and then decide whether a statewide scale-up makes sense. So that's one pillar. The second pillar that we have is the policy advisory or the policy outreach groups. So all of our state partnerships also have these mechanisms where the same researchers who are experts in that area, right? So whether it's Professor Karthik Muralidharan, whether it's Esther Duflo, whether it's Abhijit Banerjee, also provide these type of advisories to some of these important decision makers, right? And then the third pillar is the capacity building work that we do, where our capacity building activities go way beyond just talking about impact evaluation. So whether it's pushing, for example, we work with the Department of Economics and Statistics in the government of Tamil Nadu to push them to adopt a digital data collection tool rather than doing it manually, right? Now we are working with them and their data analytics unit to look at this transactional data and come up with and analyze it. So I think it's an entire 360 approach that works. And then to the question that you asked previously about academics working together with governments, I think the way the incentives work is for academics, it's important that the idea has to be something original. So it's not just about the evaluation of a program, whether the program works or not, but it's about a behavioral component, whether that particular program is also going to change the way in which people behave, right? And then you can draw lessons which are not just about the context, but may apply elsewhere, right? So that's one way of thinking. And in fact, a lot of times people feel innovations only happen with NGOs, governments don't innovate. That is definitely not the case. So I think it's really about getting the two together, and where JPAL has been successful to some extent in being responsive to the needs of governments, and that is why the demand for our work is going, is again because of this 360 approach to say, yes, we will, and these studies take time. I will not lie to you, RCTs take time because the outcomes that you're focusing on, they take time to change. So a lot of our work in education, for example, will not be that long because they are looking at the academic calendars of students, which is typically 1 year, right? But at the same time, I think there are also a wealth of insights that come from the work we do through our assessments, through our policy insights, formative work, which in fact also allow the governments to give good. We don't publish them, but we have these as reports that go to governments on a very regular basis. And the governments can use that data, can take that data for decision making as well.
Okay, Dr. Bonu, coming to you, that world over, basic understanding is that governments are generally conservative, they are much less agile, and so what would be your advice to heads of M&E institutions who would want to put in place successful partnerships?
Interesting question. Definitely, I don't agree with the statement, opening statement that you made, that governments are conservative. And so look at NITI. In my own office, I have 70% staff who are laterally hired. We are open, we are looking, NITI, if you look at the constitution of NITI, the cabinet order, it talks about partnerships, reaching out, exploring synergies, whether it is center state, state. There is a lot of demand or pressure on the government to deliver. So I don't think in terms of outcomes, all the stakeholders probably want the same thing. The public expenditure should be spent more effectively. So definitely different partners have different way of functioning. And it's very important for each one to appreciate where the other partner comes from. And things have to be built around trust. And we continuously have to explore situations to find out win-win. Maybe things are not obvious at the beginning, but the most important thing is everyone should come into a room and sit down and truly start off as a partner. You can't start off as a boss and then expect everyone to fall in line. And then try to appreciate and start exploring options where you can find partnerships which can come through. So it took us time when we started this journey. It took us 7 to 8 months time. Different partners have different constraints. So we also need to explore. So in a way, it has to, government generally tend to go ahead with what they think. But I think when it comes to partnerships and long-term partnerships, it's very, very important to appreciate the concerns and viewpoints of other partners. And then based on it, we can always find some convergence points, that would be the initial convergence based on that initial trust and comfort that we have. And slowly, based on ongoing partnerships, we can further deepen. So that means we need more patience. But the most important thing is to keep on reminding that everyone in that room ultimately have the same objective and goal. If we are truly committed to achieve that goal, that means we have to forget about egos and other differences and try to focus on opportunities which are there to achieve that outcomes, on which I don't think there's much difference.
Just sir, coming to Maaike, this in just about any partnership will have one part which is hard bargain, one part, which is soft, soft component. Now, for entering into these win-win partnership, which Dr. Bonu highlighted, what are the few things that, one needs to keep in mind? And how can you sort of create, from a perspective of, of an international organization which works in, different countries, what have been the experience, what has been the experience of UNICEF in terms of working out win-win partnerships?
Good question. I mean, multi-stakeholder initiatives and partnerships and what makes them successful. There's a whole literature out there, by the way. In a previous life, I actually looked at some of this. But we've actually done a mapping, UNICEF, across the world in terms of what makes our partnerships on evaluation successful. And I'm happy to share that report if that's useful to anyone who's interested. But basically what we found is the key ingredients and the way that we really work at the level of in any government, and certainly in any country, and certainly at this in India here. It really is about aligning a common goal, an objective, and realizing what everyone can bring to the table. And I think what other ingredients are is mutual trust and respect, right? Which I think is the core of any partnership. What we've also found is that we're able, through our own expertise, engage a very wide net of stakeholders. And so because we are an international organization, not only internationally, but even at the local level, in India itself, at state level, we have CSO partners, we have academic partners, we have different partners that we can try and bring together. So that convening part is really important and has been quite successful. And establishing the links as well across the board. And actually two things that we've noticed that have made it really quite successful from a personal experience, but also globally, is with governments working on M&E, it is an ability to move quickly and respond quickly. And I think what Shagun was also saying, if it's not just that we're going to wait for an RCT to happen, we can already start doing things now, evaluative, right? So we're actually looking at things like evaluability assessments, design evaluations, and this is a large part actually of what Dr. Gonzalo and Coneval has done as well, and been able to drive the success of Coneval. It's not, a lot of policymakers need information right then and there. Otherwise, they're going to miss the window. Otherwise, they're not going to be able to spend that money, right? So what can we do in our community to be, and actually some of that at state level, we've been able to do quite successfully. So quickly see whether the design of it, there's a theory of change is, what are your outputs and outcomes and so forth. So I think that responsiveness, and we've had many conversations that I think is key in this case. And also, to be honest, in some way, what has also made us successful is we're able to understand sometimes the sensitivities around M&E, right? So I think that's also what maybe Dr. Ashwini and Shagun were saying as well. But and Shagun was actually saying that sometimes the products that JPL produces aren't actually public and published, right?
That's right.
And we do that quite consciously. Whereas transparency and data being publicly available is ultimately our goal, in some cases we realize that we need to be flexible and we need to be informative. And our primary goal is making sure that evidence is used in policy making, and robust evidence is used. So I think that flexibility and understanding, and us being able to understand both the kind of research and evaluation and M&E side, as well as the government perspective in terms of using it, have been very successful. Okay. So I think that's some of our experience. Yeah.
Okay. Professor Ashwini, just coming to you, sometimes partnerships are just driven by the top. Sometimes they're driven by just one individual, but they have to be implemented by a different set of individuals, and the continuity also has to be ensured. So how do you ensure, especially in a multi sort of department research organization which works so much in a matrix kind of format, how do you ensure that buy-in across various hierarchies in the ISB? Hello.
You have to unmute, Ashwini.
Yes. Well, the system also told me this time. I'm very impressed. The central element of ensuring coherence, which is what I believe you are attending to.
Yes. Yes.
The central element of ensuring coherence in collaborations, partnerships, and forward movement is leadership. That was your starting point. There's no question about it. individuals have to make sure that there is coherence. But the longevity of successful partnerships within an organization, I'm talking about within ISB, because we have very successful partnerships across departments where not just faculty, but also others can work, including students, very successfully. The arrow that goes back to the leadership is accountability. And that is, of course, much easier said than done. And it's much easier actually in private organizations than in public organizations because of the phenomena of what I called upward accountability. Because it is, I mean, the dean of ISB is technically accountable to the board of ISB, but in the way in which our institution is organized, we can hold him accountable as well. So until and unless there is downward accountability of the leadership, longevity cannot be ensured.
Right. So great. We have a number of questions from our audience, and I would like to take quite a few of those questions, as many as I can. Shagun, there's one question coming from Himaji that says, how does one build their career in M&E? Are there any courses?
Yeah, thanks. I think that's a great question, and it just shows that people are sort of passionate about this field, which is what we need more and more in India. So I think again, like I mean, that's a great question, because M&E is sort of an applied, a super applied form of research. And in India, especially till when I was growing up here and before when I went abroad for my PhD, you can learn things about evaluation and monitoring through some of the subjects, but there was no specific discipline called M&E, because it also draws on how you do research, and it's essentially about building these frameworks, but the knowledge resides in maybe in you do quantitative courses, you do statistics, and then you learn some of this, right? However, now a lot of the institutions, a lot of these colleges are actually building out semesters which are looking at evaluation training. So, even in India, you have Jindal School of Public Policy or Ashoka, all of them are having specific courses that are calling out the word evaluation. Otherwise, evaluation is something which is kind of many times linked with research and goes there. So in terms of career, the way I would say is that I think first is that definitely education and qualification is important. And if you're really serious about M&E, I think understanding good statistics, good quantitative, and I'm not saying that, qualitative is not important, that's also very, very equally important. But basically a lot of it has to do about data analysis, it has to do about number crunching at large scale. So I would definitely suggest that go in for a good course that gives you that training. Okay. And then experience really matters. I think once you have the basic foundation to be able to understand certain concepts, there's nothing that can match the power of experience. And the more messy it is, the better trained you will emerge. So I would highly encourage you to take opportunities with governments, actually go in the departments and see the data, work with it, and you'll realize that you learn so much more.
Right. Okay. Great. Dr. Bonu, this is a difficult question, and coming to you, and somebody by the name Aayog has asked, and I'm not the one. So what needs to be done to have a national evaluation policy in India?
Aayog, I was checking if there were other Aayogs also. I realized that there's only one Aayog among the participants. So yes, clearly this evaluation is so critical. It's not, evaluation is a process of trying to understand how things happened against what was initially thought, and to learn and adopt. It's a process, it's extremely critical. And articulating policy on how the nation or a state or any government entity would like to do is very critical. So there's no doubt about it. And we are working on it, and hopefully we'll have something in place.
Dr. Bonu, there's one more question coming from Amitabh Gautam, who's the Deputy Director from National Productivity Council, and he's sort of asking, how do you enter into institutional partnerships, its modalities, and how government institutions can work together in M&E space?
Yeah, let me respond to a couple of questions there. I think there was one question on institutional partnerships. Then
yes.
Amitabh has also asked about it. Then Karthik, I think, was asking about there are M&D systems within NGOs and CSOs,
yes.
and over a period of time, they have mastered a lot of these skills, and
yes.
how these capabilities and skills can be brought together for larger purposes through DMEO partnership. Yeah. So to all the participants who are here, I would like to clearly state that we are looking for partners all across the stakeholder spread. We are looking for partnering with NGOs, CBOs, and also as I initially mentioned. So I think, and as I said, it's not about getting your capabilities to execute tasks that we have. We also think that we have an intermediation role. So we want to have a panel list of experts whom any district magistrate or any state government or any entity can quickly get in touch with if they have monitoring and evaluation needs. So through these partnerships, we want to build an ecosystem where someone who is keen to get monitoring evaluation done has standardized protocols and existing partnership frameworks, so that they don't need to reinvent the whole terms of reference and and also go through the procurement process, and finally the whole thing is so intimidating that you give up the idea. So in a way, yes, we are keen, and we are even today's presentation is we are looking forward to expand our networks. So this is one of the key outcomes that we are looking forward through this presentation. We want to reach out and express our interest to partner. So in a way, yes, we are keen and we'll continue to explore. Thank you.
Okay, so one of the questions that that has been coming from a number of participants rather is that just one second. Yes, India has launched several development schemes, but yet poverty could not be eliminated. And we lack in implementation and baseline data. Please throw some some light on it. This issue of baseline data collection always comes up, and that is one thing that is asked. And one more question that I'll just combine with it, that one of the methodological challenges in forging a stakeholder process is that how do you develop a shared vision, and how do you facilitate a process of building shared understanding? So these two questions, if Maaike, I mean, would you like to?
I'll definitely answer, I guess, the second one, and I'm sure that Shagun and Dr. Ashwini will have their own views on the first. Really, what we're talking about is shared understanding comes down to what I would say human psychology and how we work together, which is the case in any partnership or any collaboration. I think what has been key, or I think what our experience has to get people on the same page about a shared understanding of what is required, is knowledge and experience and sharing of experiences. And I think that's one of the things that we also try to focus on. We do a lot of documentation and experience sharing, and I think that is really, really important when it comes down to thinking about how do we establish a common sense of what our purpose is. The other thing I think, and I've said this for a while, and one thing that I'd like to focus on, and I think Dr. Bonu touched on it too, when you think of policymakers, really the point, a lot of decision makers in the world really care about cost effectiveness. They want to get the real outcomes and results for their population at the most efficient way possible, right? I think that's actually a basic concept where we have found quite a lot of overlap, because at the end of the day, that's also what a lot of researchers want. It's also what a lot of our M&E ecosystem wants, right? And there are very few people, except for a few exceptions, decision makers, that proactively want to go and waste money on outcomes that will never be improved, which links to the poverty question, right? We have not been looking at cost effectiveness, I think. We may have been putting in place some monitoring systems here, and I think there are many problems with implementation, but where is really the crux of it, I would say, in part, is looking at both the money as well as the results. And I think that that's an important part. And the final point I was going to say, and I will just kind of encourage people to learn from this, what we saw in the Mexico situation, and the DMEO knows this very well, is actually what they were able to do there is align incentives around this idea of a multidimensional poverty index. So this idea that is actually the common goal. So rather than being in silos on education, health, and all these other outcomes, actually what we're looking at is a comprehensive outcome framework for our country, or an impact framework for our country. And what they were able to do is actually build strategic partnerships around that and be able to implement much more effective monitoring and evaluation as a result. And I think that also, yeah, I think that's also really important, and something I know the DMEO is also looking into, because it actually aligns a lot of incentives and a lot of the work that we do, both as researchers and as well as policymakers. Sorry, okay. On the baseline, I will leave it to the other.
Right. You know, quite a few questions. If we are not able to sort of answer, then you can write to us, and the email can DMEO evaluation. Sanjana, can you just give the email address down there in the question answer, so that we can have participants address their questions there. Also, because we are nearing time, just about 4 minutes left. Professor Chhatre, you know, I mean, one question that has been asked, that can you talk a little bit more about systematic efforts to build capacity of M&E practitioners in India by ISB and some other universities?
Mm-hmm. And ISB is not the first, and there have been people before. IIM Bangalore, for example, has done significant work in monitoring and evaluation. Delhi School of Economics, Indian Social Institute in Delhi. So there is a robust, there is a history to doing good work, and the students that go through these institutions also have chosen monitoring and evaluation as a career. What we have failed to do, including ISB, is to broaden the field from the strictly economic thinking, purely quantitative, the average treatment effect framework. And RCT is fine, it's just one of the tools, but in many cases, like in epidemiology and public health, you cannot randomize people to tuberculosis. You can randomize people to the drug for tuberculosis, but if you want to understand the progression of a disease, you have to understand how to deal with observational data. And we have sort of gone back to some extent in our zeal for perfection. So what we have failed to do is embrace the full range of methods, all the way down to the college students who should be able to do it as their master's thesis. And the more we are able to do that and incorporate it, we will be able to use new technologies like natural language processing algorithms to extract knowledge out of these new initiatives.
Right. You know, we have almost run out of time. We have 2 minutes left. Before we end, just you know, if each of our panelists could make just 1 or 2 sentence parting remarks for making partnerships work and deliver. Dr. Bonu?
Yeah, I just 1 minute. I can only thank my panelists here, Shagun, who has helped us to build this partnership with JPAL, and we are working with UNICEF. We have a formal partnership now with JPAL. We are looking forward to having similar type of partnerships with ISB Mohali as well as UNICEF and many others. And clearly there is so much of capabilities, and the challenges are humongous given the COVID situation that we have seen. We are going to live in a resource constrained environment where the resources have to be targeted better and used much better. So we need much more, much deeper evidence, data-based decision making, monitoring, and so forth. So I think it means that we need to do even more to build strong partnerships, because we are all deeply dedicated and committed to the final outcomes, that is to improve the life well-being of some of the most marginalized people in this country. You know? So that's the message.
Right, Maaike.
Oh, final words. So I think a lot of it has already been mentioned. I think leadership is really important. I think commitment to a common goal is really important. But actually, to be honest, in my personal experience, I'm going to put my hat as social psychologist, but I think it applies here in the UNICEF experience too. The people really matter who are engaged in the partnership. So I think and you know that too, I think as DMEO, it is actually the people who are leading these partnerships, the people themselves, right? I think who are passionate, who have that common shared goal and openly communicate and brainstorm and think together. I think at a very personal level, I think that's also absolutely crucial to making sure that partnerships eventually work or break down. So.
Okay, Professor Ashwini.
Well, I'm very grateful for this opportunity. I hope that we can continue with this because we can see there is a lot of interest and there is stuff to do and learn from each other. And my parting words would be that I hope these are not lost words.
That's right. Okay. Shagun?
Yeah, again, just wanted to echo what everyone said, and I want to also congratulate DMEO to kind of taking forward this big agenda and really calling out the need and also reaching out to all of us. And I think that really in itself, I think is an achievement, because you're creating a space for something that doesn't really exist in the systematic manner. The second thing, my parting word would be that for partnerships in M&E to be really successful, I think what's really important is the mindset to shift from M&E for purely accountability to M&E for learning. And once that happens, once people really realize the power of M&E for themselves to learn, whether it's a bureaucrat sitting at the top or a functionary at the lowest level, I think that's where the actual change will start happening. So DMEO, I think you're really positioned to start changing the discourse around M&E.
Right. So shifting the discourse from M&E for accountability to M&E for learning. Thank you, Dr. Bonu, Professor Ashwini, Maaike, and Shagun for the wonderful discussion, and also to the audience for some great questions. Good day.
Thank you, Alok, for doing a great job as a moderator. I think you stuck to time and really brought the best among all the panelists. Thank you, Alok.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Good day.